Welcome to IDG Talks. My name is Anastasia Lavrina, and today we have a very special guest from China, Andrew Leung, international and independent China strategist. Hello and welcome to our program.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, was interviewed by China Media Group Media Corporation. In that interview, many very important and relevant issues about the bilateral cooperation between China and Azerbaijan were covered. And in this particular interview, I would like to address several questions to you about the current level of cooperation between Beijing and Baku and the perspective for the future. So the first question, in his answers, President Ilham Aliyev mentioned what has been achieved was only the beginning of the very long journey. What are the most relevant areas for cooperation between the two countries and why Azerbaijan is so important for China?
Well, I just viewed the interview in full, almost an hour. It was very, very impressive because it touches on almost all of the very critical dimensions which cement the relationship between Azerbaijan and China. Firstly, I think it focuses on the need to any government, whether it's Western democracies or Chinese system or Azerbaijan's government, the so-called democracy, the Western democracy or not, is only a process. What's important is the result, the outcome. The outcome must be the livelihood and the well-being of the people. And the best judge whether a system is successful or not, regardless of the process, whether it's Western democracies or a Chinese system or Azerbaijan system. The most important measure is the people's livelihood, people's well-being. So if you look at China has been very, very successful as a system because the lives of one-fifth of humanity, 1.4 billion people, have been totally transformed. Likewise, Azerbaijan, since its independence, and as the president highlighted, the lives of the Azerbaijan people before the independence have been extremely difficult. And now, after independence, the founding father, who is the father of the current president, um, established the nationhood of Bajan, and also in face of various other um, critical issues like the relationship with Armenia and with the former USSR and Azerbaijan being a backward country. Now Azerbaijan is on the road to prosperity. You can see that the livelihood of the people have been vastly improved. So there is a great similarity as what happened in China. China, of course, had undergone a very difficult period, the so-called centuries of humiliation, the wars with the Second World War, the occupation by Japan, and also abject poverty. And now China is now emerging on the road to stability.
Well, the position of China and Azerbaijan is coinciding on sovereignty, independence, not interference to the affairs of other countries. It will be nice to know your opinion on these particular issues more in details.
Again, that there is a great similarity with China. Of course, China, the Taiwan issue, the Hong Kong issue, and of course the national security in the South China Sea and Azerbaijan in its relationship with Armenia and with the geopolitics happening in now with Ukraine and bordering with Central Asia, the Caucasus, the Caspian Sea. So I think there are great similarities on the need to for to preserve national territorial integrity and national security.
So my next question, culture. President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, has also spoken about the importance of culture in the development of bilateral relations. How well Azerbaijan is known in China. What can you tell us about the relations between Baku and Beijing in the frame of cooperation within the project One Belt, One Road?
And of course, Azerbaijan had a great long periods of history. Baku, as highlighted, the capital of Azerbaijan, was a key port, a key a city in the ancient Silk Road. Is a melting pot between Western civilization and also Central civilization, and also civilization coming from China, India, and so on. That defined the Azerbaijan's the origin of its economy, trading with its products like oil and jewelry and carpets. So I think that there is a great similarity with what's happening with the China's Belt and Road. And China's Belt and Road has been again in the beginning demonized by the West as China's aggressive move, but actually it brings the countries together. It links the countries economically, and when there is trade and there is going to be more stability. And you can look at what the West is trying to do now, is trying to decouple, trying to separate countries into camps, trying to put barriers into relationships, and trying to so-called de-risk, meaning that they're going to decouple, to separate countries that could only add to conflict. Whereas international trade, more inclusive relationship, would lead to greater peace. So again, that this is extremely important. And also, I was also impressed by the reference to the role played by international sports. For example, your president was a sportsman himself, and he highlighted rightly the importance, the role played by sports in forging a kind of national identity. So if people win in international sports, it would add to a pride in a place, whether it be a country or a city like Hong Kong, or a country in be it in the Caucasus, or indeed around the world. So sports has a very important role to play, apart from improving people's health. A healthy country is a happy country. So I think that this stands in stark contrast with what's happening in the West, with the flooding of drugs, legalizing cannabis, and then you can see that this is the so-called freedom is leading to an unbridled kind of scenario, where people just take their own personal freedom to extreme, destroying the national health, destroying the well-being of its people.
I guess we have to also touch the issue about the Western media, which was discussed in the interview. In China, the interview of President Ilham Aliyev to BBC in 2020 became very famous. So I would like to know your opinion about this issue, about the Western media, sometimes biased approach, double standards, and that video of President Ilham Aliyev to BBC.
I think that your president quite rightly highlighted the double standards played by international media. And they always say the freedom of speech, and then the example of what's happened to Assange, the whistleblower, is a typical example. And all the while, the West media plays puts on a pedestal the so-called freedom of speech when it comes to to what Assange is trying to achieve. Now they say that this is national security. So that I think that this is a lot of double standards, and more people around the world, especially in the developing world, that they're seeing through these double standards. When it suits the interests of the elite in the West, they'll say one thing, but when it goes against their own hegemony or their own the national priorities, they would twist the narrative around. That's how they demonize China. That's how they demonized Azerbaijan. So I think that there is a great deal of similarity there.
Well, how do you think Baku and Beijing may support each other more active within the international organizations, on the international platforms, where, as you also mentioned, sometimes the policy of double standards prevail?
So looking at all these domains, there is a common consensus that countries like China and Azerbaijan take pride in preserving their own national sovereignty, their own territorial integrity, their own independence, and yet they find great resonance or rapport with one another as partners in international trade and also partners in building people-to-people relationships. I think it's a great force for peace and stability in the Caucasus and in Central Asia, particularly with organizations like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, of which Azerbaijan is also a member. And with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is now becoming a magnet attracting other applicants, not only from Central Asia, but from faraway continents who they want to join, countries in Asia, and also even in certain countries in other continents. They want to join this Shanghai Cooperation Organization because they think that this is a good I wouldn't say bloc. It's not exactly a bloc, but it's a grouping with a great deal of common interest, promoting trade, international cooperation, and above all, peace and stability and inclusiveness. Rather than the Western rhetoric of pitching the so-called democracy, Western democracies against, within quotation marks, what they perceive as autocracies, without paying attention to the outcome of these two kind of governments as the beginning of this interview. The outcome must be judged to what extent the people, regardless of the process or whether democracy or not, whether the people's livelihood have been improved, whether the people's well-being have been improved. And here you can compare with what's happening in China and in Azerbaijan and with what's happening in the West. Now, the West is now, as I said, the society is torn apart, and then they're suffering from a great deal of internal problems, like a broken infrastructure, and then the flooding of drugs, and also gun violence, and then homelessness. So I think that this rhetoric pitching one system against another is beginning to be seen through by many countries, especially in the development world, as a kind of bankrupt, double standard narrative that is only engineered by certain Western elites.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining IDD Talks today. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed.